Hello, everybody. Welcome to Alex Aquarius. This is Stories and Prayer, also known as the Plain Mundane Show. You know, I started this channel about 7 or 8 years ago, and I named my show the Plain Mundane Show. Mundane meaning world or worldly, and plain meaning flat, infinite plane. The world plain as it will be. So we're going to look at aliens and some rare cases, and I've got some set up here. This is what a gray alien looks like. This is exactly the best drawing I've ever seen for what they look like. This is, when I saw this, it was so shocking to me and my suppressed memories that it literally, I threw my head back and went, whoa, and had to rewind it and freeze frame this so I could show you. This is what a gray alien looks like. Now, let me go over to the chat room here and look at participants. Let's see if anybody's coming in. I just started this at 11:42 p.m. Central Time. This is what the gray looks like. Let me go ahead and show you what this story is about this woman named Julia. This alien's name was Sen, S-E-N. All right.
Realized that it was probably what had happened. It was aliens, but the whole idea terrified her and she refused to think about it. She decided to just drop the subject, not to think about it, and move on with her life.
That's not what they look
but
like.
in 2011, everything changed. She
They
had a
don't
sudden
look
and
like
very
that.
strong impulse to move back to California, and as she said, "I honestly can't tell you why I felt like I was being directed to do this." So she and her boyfriend moved to Pacific Grove, California, and this is when her life started to get really strange again. She started having some weird harmonic ringing sounds in her ear, and her right ear was like tinnitus. She went to the doctor, but he could not explain it. There were no insects in her ear canal, as she feared.
I've been looking at cases today to prepare for this show, and I'm going to tell you that ringing in the ear, it's called tinnitus. You'll hear people say tinnitus. It's not tinnitus. It's accents from the third to last syllable. I think that's called paraproxiton. A paraproxiton.
And it was not tinnitus. The doctor had no diagnosis. Then came the UFO sightings, weird glowing orbs hovering over the house. One evening, there was a ship overhead. Julia saw it through the skylight above her bed. The next thing she knew, she was paralyzed. A short time later, she fell asleep. In the morning, she told everything
That's
her
a good one.
boyfriend. She could no longer live in denial. Through the skylight above her bed.
That one there,
The
that
next
was a
thing
good
she knew, she was
depiction. Not that
paralyzed.
one.
A short time
This one here. That's a very good depiction of what the grays look like. On that one, I would say the jaws are a little bit too pronounced and the mouth is too big. The eyes are kind of big and dark, scary looking, where they're they have more of a cheekbone and a normal eye socket, not just the big black, rotten, necrotic looking hole.
later, she fell asleep. In the morning, she told everything her boyfriend. She could no longer live in denial. The memories of her childhood experience were flooding back. The excruciating tones in her right ear were becoming unbearable. UFOs were hovering over their house, and she finally found the reason for her problems. It was aliens, and they had been visiting her since she was a girl. Now they were back, and she believed the source of the tones in her ear was probably an alien implant. Her boyfriend was shocked, but he was also very supportive. He believed her, but had no idea how to help her. Deeply in love, they got married. Julia examined her childhood. She remembered seeing colorful orbs when she was a little girl. She recalled hundreds of times when her bedroom was filled
that right
with
there,
light and scary, shadowy figures materialized
real.
around her. She remembered her bedroom was filled with orbs when she was a little girl. She recalled hundreds of times when her bedroom...
This footage right there, right there. Do you see that? That footage is real because they say that when the spacecraft are hovering slowly, when they slow down and come out of almost that anti-gravity wave, when they spin this liquid metal that they have that's an element, like Bob Lazar said, is more closer to 115 on the atomic chart. Some say up to 125 and down to 110. But they spin it around the outer edge of that saucer craft is a tube, and inside of that tube is this metal. Like, think of liquid mercury, and it spins around. Some people have actually made anti-gravity little toys with spinning mercury in India. They say the ancient Magi were doing that, and they spin it around the edges of that thing at a super high velocity, and you put magnets at a certain point, and it draws the energy, and the tube starts to bend space and time because it goes so fast that, as you know, it's going around one end, as it's coming out of one end, it's already entering the other, and it therefore becomes an infinite loop. As one alien says, we're going to cover that later on. But this is what several people have said. When they slow down, they wobble like a coin. When you spin it and it's right before it peters out, it goes into a flat wobble. Just like that. That's what makes me think this footage is real. Okay.
Flying saucer when she was 10. Julia could no longer deny that she was having contact with extraterrestrials. Then one evening, she woke up to hear a weird musical sound reverberating through the house. She wandered around trying to locate the source. Then she realized it was inside her head. Next thing she knew, Julia found herself being pulled on board a craft. She saw that she was laying on a table in a small round room, surrounded by short, thin, gray-skinned beings with large...
You know, it's always the poor women that end up in these crafts in the gynecologist chair getting inseminated, and then they have these embryos that grow for 2 months, and then they come back 2 to 5 months, and they come back to take them. And it's traumatic. And one lady was pregnant and was with her husband when the aliens came and impregnated her, and then she got pregnant, and then months later they came back and took the baby. And when she went to the doctor, she had no scarring in the womb.
And big dark...
I'm sorry, she had no scarring in the womb. We may cover this. It's one of my clicks. We're going to get into it.
Dark eyes. They handed her a baby and asked her to hold it. It looked just like a gray alien. Julia was shocked. And looking outside the craft, she saw the darkness of space, and far below her, the planet Earth. The next thing she knew, it was morning, and she was back in bed. Looking at her stomach, she saw 3 bleeding puncture wounds. Both Julia and her husband were shocked and traumatized, and they became even more shocked when they discovered that Julia was pregnant. From this point, events escalated. Julia kept waking up to find herself unable to move. One evening, her husband woke up to see a gray alien entering their bedroom. Shortly later, Julia had a miscarriage. She was secretly relieved. The pregnancy had not felt normal, and she was certain that it had something to do with the night she was taken on board a craft. At that point, her experiences ended. Or so she thought. They fled California and moved to the East Coast. They had a baby boy and became pregnant with their second child. Then one morning, Julia decided to reach out mentally to contact the gray alien baby she had held in her arms years ago. To her shock, she made instant contact. In her mind, she saw a gray. He introduced himself and said his name was Sen and that he was made up of her DNA. Then began an hours-long conversation in which Julia learned all the answers about everything that had happened to her throughout her life. She felt very strongly telepathically connected to him, to the degree that she actually found herself inside this little ship with him and could see everything he was seeing. This was the beginning of an hours-long conversation between Julia and Sen. Julia said he showed her his planet, spaceship, and technology. Further, she was told about their agenda. Sen explained to her that his race used humans to bridge themselves back into the law of attraction. A long time ago, their species was like humans, beautiful creatures that reproduced on a planet. They chose a life of exploration among the stars and began to experiment on themselves to create bodies better suited for space travel. They began the long process of eliminating the strands of DNA that existed in the law of attraction. Hormones and emotions, the vibrations and frequencies were changed using light therapy. This changed them.
Do you think that as people get older and their memories come back, they could start adding maybe some of their own New Age juice into the story? Because that seems to be what's happening with that one. I don't know about some of those things that they said, you know, going to worlds and things like that, because I'm a geocentric believer, and I've seen the plane out of body. And so when people start talking about journeying to other planets, they can only be talking about the 7 planets. You know, you got the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, and Neptune. Neptune doesn't even appear on the ancient astrology maps, cosmology maps. This one is weird because this guy got to take a photograph of the aliens, and that's what they looked like. They had to energize down. They told him to wait so they could, hold on, let me rewind it for you. I'll show you this guy. What was his name? Harrison Bailey. We'll go back and show you his whole story.
And saw what appeared to be two disembodied dark heads with distorted features looking at him.
Hold on. This guy had an experience with aliens when he was like 20 years old, when he was real young. And he went on a craft and came back, and people in town saw him leaving the flying saucer. And then this is him in his older life being visited again, and then told he could take a photograph of them. And their message was to get it out that they live on Earth and they want to communicate with humans and the leaders of humans, but they've been rejected and shot at and fired at, and it's hard for them to contact humans because the powers that shouldn't be will not let them come through and communicate. They keep getting squashed and put aside and hidden away and fought off.
And as they always did, they repeated the message that he needed to inform humanity about their presence. Now, at this time, he was having severe financial problems, and he told them.
This is Preston Dennett narrating. This is his channel. He's a very astute researcher about people who have been on aboard flying saucers. And I want to tell him, if he's watching this, I'm one of them.
I've got troubles of my own, and I don't think I'm the right person for this job. Why don't you go ask somebody with some influence to help you? And their reply was, your financial problems will be settled soon. Now, before all this, researcher Ann Druffel had urged him to buy a Polaroid camera and said that if the ETs came, he should try to take their picture, and this would prove whether or not these were just dreams or if they were real. So when they appeared, he asked to take their picture, and they actually agreed and told him to wait while they, quote, de-energized, and he then captured several photos, which you can see here. They show shadowy figures in his room. These photos were subjected to extensive analysis. There was no evidence of trickery, yet the photos were too dark and blurry other than to see vague humanoid forms, and they became quite controversial. But Ann Druffel, the lead investigator of his case, wrote about all of this extensively in the MUFON UFO Journal, in Fate magazine, and in her book, How to Defend Yourself Against Alien Abduction. And as Ann Druffel says, Reverend Bailey, in my considered opinion, is an honest and rational man. In my 4 years of documenting his 1951 encounter, I have never found any discrepancy in his statement, and many facets of his complex account were verifiable at the source. Reverend Harrison Bailey passed away on November 23, 2012. He was 76 years old. Huge thanks to Ann Druffel for her tremendous investigation.
Let's go back to when Harrison Bailey's encounter started. This happened back in the 1920s, or no, 1950s, okay? So this was about 70 years ago. But he had this job where what he did was he had a baseball team that he liked, the Browns, and he would advertise for them by rolling this tire that had their team logo on it. And he would roll the tire through towns, and he would go through towns in Illinois, and he got paid to do that. And so as he's rolling the tire, he sees this flying saucer in the sky earlier in the day. And then later in the day, it's parked in a field, and he sees it again. So let me show you the story.
Investigation of this very complex case. It's so unusual. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone describe these little frog-like humanoids before. I'm wondering if perhaps that was a screen memory of some kind. Very hard to say for sure. But it's so interesting to me that this witness did his very best to spread the word about the existence of ETs, as the ETs asked him to do. This is not unusual. ETs will often charge a person with a mission, and this was absolutely true in this case. Also very interesting about this particular case is that the witness was able to capture some apparent photographs of ETs. That's incredibly rare. 100 feet away from him was a very large oval-shaped when, without warning, he flew along roadways, attracting attention of passers-by. So it was around 6 a.m. on September 23rd as he rolled his tire along the road, advertising for the St. Louis Browns baseball team. Now he was doing this for free, as the Browns were his favorite team. To attract attention, he wore green overalls, shoes and socks, carried a green backpack, and wore large goggles and gloves. So he had just passed Orland Park sometime earlier, and he was now about 25 miles outside of Joliet, Illinois, in a forested area, a pretty remote area.
And pretty far north of St. Louis, I might add. He's up in northern Illinois, almost outside of Chicago, in Joliet.
He estimates it was 11 a.m., and he was hoping to reach the town of Joliet by sunset when, without warning, he felt a strange cramping and burning sensation on the back of his neck. Turning around, he saw something strange in the sky, a sort of top-shaped gray object which was whirling in the sky behind him. Now he had never seen anything like this, and he wondered if perhaps it was some kind of unusual, quote, whirlwind.
Are you in
And
the
with many
chat?
miles still to go to reach Joliet, he didn't stop and stare at this thing, but just kept walking.
Let me
This was
know.
when suddenly there was a strange shift, and the next thing he knew, he found himself standing on a different section of road at the edge of a meadow surrounded by forest, and about 50 to 100 feet away from him was a very large oval-shaped silver-gray craft sitting in the field. It reminded him a little bit of a water tank, but it was definitely not a water tank. It was
A water
oval-shaped.
tank
It
shape.
was about the size of a Greyhound bus. So he stopped rolling his tire and stared at this thing as a door-like opening appeared in the side of the object. Immediately, two strange-looking men came up to the opening. They stood side by side and stared back at him. The men were wearing helmets with sort of tinted face shields, which reminded him of welders. He could see that their faces looked distorted, and that their eyes were bigger and longer than a normal person's, so they did not appear to be human. It was clear to him that this object was some kind of aircraft, probably the same one he had seen earlier, as he could now feel the same prickling feelings, only it was now over his entire body, causing his body to vibrate. He also felt like he was paralyzed. So he wondered briefly if these guys might be some kind of Russian spies, or maybe, he wondered, these were the flying saucer people he had heard about. At this point, one of the occupants spoke, asking Harrison in perfect English, "Where are you from?" Harrison replied, "Gary, Indiana." They asked him, "Where are you going?" And he replied, "St. Louis, Missouri." Now he wasn't even sure how he could hear them talking or how they heard him, but he did say that the two men in the craft looked at each other as if they were conversing, and he now remembered an article by journalist Walter Winchell about how people who saw flying saucers were often ridiculed. And now, finding that he was no longer paralyzed, Harrison decided to walk away.
I just wanted to add, I just had a flashback experience of an experience where I remember when they communicate telepathically to each other, they do look at each other and make head movements as if they're acknowledging some type of communication between each other. They don't just stare at the wall or look down or ignore. When another one is speaking telepathically, they look at them.
Did glance back once and saw that the strange craft was still sitting there silently in the field. Once the craft was out of sight, Harrison found that he suddenly felt very unwell. He had painful cramps in his shoulders, arms, legs, and abdomen. He felt extremely tired, and looking around him, he was shocked to see that it was now late afternoon. So he estimates he was missing about 6 hours of time that he could not account for. He really had no choice but to keep walking. He reached the outside of Joliet, Illinois in the late evening, and he knew it was unlikely that he would find a hotel. He happened upon a railroad station depot. Investigators have now identified this as being in the small town of Mokina, Illinois. Harrison says a friendly man at the station allowed him to sleep inside, and as Harrison drifted off to sleep, he heard people talking outside about seeing a flying saucer. The next morning he walked into town, and he was confronted by a group of white people who were watching him suspiciously. Now, being a lone black man in the 1950s, he became very nervous, especially when they blocked his way. And one of the men confronted him and said, "Hey you, did we see you come out of a flying saucer yesterday?" Harrison was, of course, shocked by the accusation, especially considering his encounter of the day before, and he told them, "No, sir, I'm not from any flying saucer." He actually showed them his identification and some newspaper clippings about his advertising wheel.
Could you imagine?
They demanded he take off his shoes, and he obliged. The men then examined his feet, and finally one of the men shouted out, "Hey, this fella ain't out of a flying saucer. He's
What would
black."
his feet have to do with anything?
At this point, the men apologized to Harrison, and the crowd dispersed, but Harrison was shaken. He did his best to forget the incident. He did later outfit his wheel with lights, which caused some people to jokingly report it as a flying saucer. But fearing ridicule and the loss of his job at the steel mill, Harrison told nobody about his UFO encounter. Over the next few months, he continued to feel fatigue and stomach pains, and not long after the incident in 1952, he was drafted and served 2 years in the Army. He then went back to work at the steel mill in Gary, Indiana. He slowly curtailed his advertising job as he no longer had the energy to push that wheel and walk long distances, but he did go to doctors for help, and they could find nothing wrong. Finally, in 1963, Harrison was admitted to the Heinz Veterans Administration Hospital for gallbladder surgery, and this is when something very strange happened. Afterwards, the surgeon approached him and asked Harrison, "What's the matter with you? What's going on inside your body?" Now Harrison replied, "I don't know. What do you mean?" The doctor then became angry and said, "Don't lie to me. We've been all through your records. You've been somewhere, or something has gone through your body you're not telling us about. What is it?" So Harrison began to suspect that this had something to do with his encounter, but he played dumb and just said, "I don't know."
How would a doctor know that? You know, back then when did they, in 1963? That was a year before I was born, so that was like not too long ago. That 1963, he goes to a doctor, and was the doctor just saying that metaphorically out loud and just happened to be on the nose on the button? Was he on the nail? Was he nailing it when he said something or someone has been through you? You know, I can imagine doctors can tell. You know, I worked in the pain management industry, and I knew a lot of pain doctors, and a lot of them work under the C-arm fluoroscopy radiation most of the day when they're doing procedures, at least 2 days a week. And some of them, if they don't wear the proper ray-resistant gloves, their hands wither and their hands look old. You can meet doctors that are in their 30s or 40s, and their hands look like they're in their 70s or 80s, you know. And that I picture is what the inside of Harrison's body looked like when the doctor went in there and said, "Your organs just look old." You can just tell they just look withered and worn out and different.
Finally, they told him and his wife that he was in, quote, "very, very bad shape." Apparently, his internal organs were that of an old man. At this time, he was only 35 years old. And as Harrison says, "During my stay in the hospital in 1963, my mind often went back to the object I'd seen out in the woods, and when the people thought that they had seen me coming out of a flying saucer ship. Could this have been a real UFO?"
So the radiation got him. Let's listen to this story of a woman. Was that the one we already saw when she was starting to get into the New Age?
Pacific Palisades.
Yeah.
And I walked up to the window and I saw this light on the horizon that I'd never seen before. I'd lived on the beach my whole life, and it wasn't a boat and it wasn't a star. I just watched this craft. The next thing I knew, it jetted into the stars and disappeared, and I went to bed as usual.
Oh, missing
I
time.
woke up in the middle of the night, and I was not in my bed any longer. I was naked and I was paralyzed.
You know, that's another thing right
Being's
there.
eyes-
That's notable, folks. In this show, you're learning something tonight. When people say that the craft pulled up, it was in the sky, they noticed the light in the sky. They suddenly, something catches their, suddenly they're not even looking that direction. They can be doing something, I was walking my dog and I noticed I was looking down at the dog and suddenly I turned around and looked at the sky and there's a bright light. Something made them turn around. First of all, they get your attention. Something focused on her and beamed energy and little vibrations and a message to her brain to turn around and notice the light and look at it. And then I think what they do, this is actually like if you've flown a plane and you know what VOR is, you know what your azimuth is, the line, if you look at something, let's say you're looking at that craft and you wanted to board the craft and you hadn't, I'm doing this in reverse from what they do. Let's say you wanted to board that craft and you had advanced technologies and you could use your brain and a neural tied, you had the newest thing from Elon Musk in your brain. And what you would do is kind of slide into the craft. Or you let the craft come to you, it just envelops you and you go in it. Because you can fold space. So it's really like you have no inertia. You just become, it just kind of, it's like sliding into a kaleidoscope is what I describe it as I've done it while remote viewing. You just slide and you're in it, or it's right there, but you never lost focus. It was on your azimuth, it's on the path. When a plane is, 3,500 feet up and out a few miles, and they say, your next waypoint, you're going to go at 2,000 feet at Hebe or whatever the next point is called. And you have to make sure you got the right speed and the right thing, and from there, or you can use VOR. That's the ILS approach, but I've been watching a lot of plane aviation channels. But that's why when you look at these things, people describe like you can't tell if they're far away or close up, and the next thing you know, they're in your yard. Like, how did they do that? I think you have to look at them, is what I was getting at. I think what they did is when she looked at them, they want you to turn around. It seems like this is another clue that always it jumps in my mind. Is I try to tie things together and get epiphanies of things in common denominators. And it just hit me that one of them is they are telepathically communicated with or urged or just instinctively turn around and see a bright light, and then they look at it, and then they'll get another communication, or they get a communication, right? But they have to be looking at it. And I think that's the only way they can connect the azimuth, from their zenith point to where they're going, and shoot a straight line like you would lining up through a rifle to shoot at a target. Then you start sliding along that line, that trajectory. And unless you have the eye contact, you can't navigate there. And once you navigate to it, you're just there. It's like the two spaces combine, and it's like fold into each other. But it's like slipping down a kaleidoscope is what I call it. It's like if you've ever looked in a kaleidoscope and you're looking in it, and suddenly just picture the walls becoming just like something you can't tangibly tell how fast it's going. It's just sliding past you, but you just slip into things. That's what they're doing. Let's see further on what we're doing here.
Saw were about 3.5 feet tall. They were naked. They were off-white. They were not gray. They had huge heads, huge wrap-around black eyes, tiny little bodies.
Tiny ones.
There are many stories of Greys abducting humans into their spaceships, and even of being inseminated with alien reproductive material and then conceiving human-alien hybrid babies and having those fetuses removed from their bodies and then grown on the alien spaceships. In some cases, people report going back onto the spaceship and being able to see these hybrid offspring.
This is the History Channel, by the way.
I was being used for my DNA. They were creating hybrid children from my eggs, someone else's sperm, and combining it with their DNA and their sperm. I would be implanted with an alien fetus, and they would leave the fetus in my body for a few months. Then they would bring me back again later, and then they would remove it.
Where do they
It was horrific.
keep
It was
them?
terrifying.
You can't have so many people saying that they've been abducted and not have some possibility of truth
George
with that.
Norrie.
I think it's happening.
N-O-O-R-Y.
I don't know if it's a hybridization
Norrie.
program for these ETs or whether they're trying to bring these hybrids back to this planet one day when the environment changes. But
a radio
in my opinion,
guy.
something very strange is happening to these people who claim to be abducted.
Yeah.
June 1st, 1990.
What if we just went for a ride?
UFO investigator Raymond Fowler publishes The Watchers, an unprecedented inside look at the Betty Andreasson case. After years of hypnosis, psych exams, and interviews, Fowler concludes that the strange beings Andreasson encountered.
Do you think that the gray aliens, not all aliens, okay, not any other type of alien you can think of, but specifically the grays, and what type even, I would say, the ones that are 3.5, 4 feet tall, not the 5 foot talls, not the 6 foot talls, not the giant ones, not. It's always the less than 4 foot. And it's the ones that look a lot like more of a baby face with the large head. They're not menacing looking. In fact, they looked kind of like a silly little baby face. This was interesting here from Preston Dennett, the experiencers. This guy asked this alien about how their propulsion works and listened to the secrets.
I asked them how they overcame gravity, and he replied that they use a very heavy fluid which circulated in a tube, and with this system they created a magnet, that is to say, somewhat as we do with electromagnetics, except that they, instead of using electricity, were using this fluid. Apparently this fluid was subjected to a velocity similar to the velocity of light, that is to say, the velocity of electricity. But I answered, that is impossible. No, he replied, it is simple. When the fluid is leaving the tube, it is already entering the other end. Thus, its relative speed is infinite.
Yeah, things that they left out were, first of all, how do you make this liquid metal that you push around at a high velocity? And two, how do you push it around at a high velocity? How do you get it up to a high velocity that's comparable to the speed of light? He doesn't even say the speed of light. He just says that it's, similar to or conversant with the speed of light. Can you imagine? You'd have to push that so fast. They must be spinning it somehow. And you just think of mechanical engineering, simple gear ratios. Is it infinitely spinning a gear ratio? That's what it is. You slide into that infinite dot and you just keep it going smaller, smaller, smaller into it. A dot that's forever shrinking.
So it seems that on the base of this system, plus a few magnets of a kind which clearly do not exist on our planet, these beings...
Okay, so they say magnets of a kind that don't exist on their planet. It says on our planet, but it's the alien speaking. through that narrator, Preston Dennett. So it's made of a few magnets which clearly do not exist on our planet. These beings achieved
Had
enormous.
achieved enormous velocities and were able to conquer gravity. So this is interesting.
So that's what they're doing. They're using the magnet to get that speed and push that metal somehow. I think what they do, Stan Deyo said, if you make a ring with, let's say you make a ring with 12 magnets, you have to remove one, so there's 11. And then the energy that builds up inside of there will escape out of that hole that you create. And and right where it does that is the antimatter spot. And then I think on top of that, you put a field around it and drive it somewhere. But that was the secret, is make a ring and remove one post. And that's how the flux, I call it the flux energy, escapes out of the missing ring spot.
Because there are a number of cases where the ETs have explained how they power the craft, and this is what they're attempting to do with this witness. And then the gentleman, HM, asked where they came from, and the ET pointed to the stars and said, quote, "From there." And I'll just let HM
You go find it,
describe
bitch.
what happened next, because this is quite interesting. As HM says in his own words, I insisted on wanting to know from which cardinal point in the sky they came. But he simply kept repeating, "From there." And then he rapidly changed the subject. It was obvious that he didn't want to say any more about that. So after we had chatted about 15 or 20 minutes, he pointed in a friendly but firm manner towards the door and invited me to leave. And I did. I went down out of the machine and departed. So he drove off while the craft was actually still there, but this really affected him profoundly. He could hardly believe this had happened to him, and very curious about it, he returned to this exact spot the very next day. And as HM again says in his own words, thinking it had all been a strange dream, I went back to the spot, and there were some very strange marks there. And on top of that, there was the matter of my can, which we had to carry the water in, and which was now missing. So he had some evidence, at least, that this experience was real and not just a dream. But it should come as no surprise that he didn't want to talk about this for quite some time and had to be convinced to tell the story, because it really is quite phantasmagorical, especially all the way back in 1951 when it occurred. But HM, the witness, is absolutely convinced it was a real experience. As he says in his own words, I remember it all, still, with absolute perfection and in all.
Okay, let's hear this one here. This is Wendell Stevenson, I think is his name. And he's talking about, he's been a researcher for a long time, but I think it started with his own experience in Vietnam, where he actually thought they were the enemy, I think.
Coming out of it are little gray entities, about 4 foot tall. As they came towards me, I'm looking at them and thought, what's going on here? But, I didn't say anything. But till the day I die, I'll remember what the little entity said to me. And the way he said it, it was like, Clifford, what are you doing here? You are not supposed to be here. At that time, I got my M16, pulled it up. You normally don't carry your weapon on full automatic. I put it on full automatic and I started to fire. And I yelled out, VC, VC. And that was to alert the other troops that we were no longer alone, that there were a number of little guys there, I'll put it that way. Well, everyone else started to shoot, but our bullets was having no effect.
Yeah. So even though the being said, Wendell, you're not supposed to be here. How did the Gray know his name? I mean, was it because they all are like an AI database where they just send out an instant signal to the rest of the platform, and the data comes back that who it is and what he is and his background, like just like reading a background on somebody, and then he says you're not supposed to be here. Like somehow he knows his life path and he's in the wrong place. That's weird. But what was the one that I showed you, the message to humanity?
Could I have gotten too close to?
Yeah, we started on that one, but I was going to show you some of the ones I saw on, there was a History Channel, Ancient Aliens one about grays and some stories.
That called themselves the Watchers were the same entities that are commonly identified today as gray aliens.
It's very interesting, this word watchers, because when you talk with so many people, you begin to hear patterns. And even if you're not sitting across from a man or a woman or a child who says, I was taken by a watcher, what you hear is the abductees knew that they were dealing with something that knew everything about them.
Just like Wendell.
Again, the watcher idea, whether you use that name or not.
Is there anyone in the chat? Say
According
hello.
to Betty's account, the extraterrestrials who took her aboard
How many
their
viewers
craft
do we have?
subjected her to medical examination.
And I was floated to a table, and as he was examining me, he said they were going to have to measure me physically. And at that point, they started to take this needle-like thing and thrust it into my navel.
Yeah, oh no.
And I could feel it going round and round inside me.
As incredible as Betty Andreessen's abduction story sounds, it is not unique. Many alleged alien abductees give very similar accounts. In 1961,
Everyone
Betty
has
and Barney
seen, I
Hill
think,
of
that.
Lancaster,
You know, the Betty and Barney Hill, that's the first alien abduction case with the mixed race couple. So just about everyone's seen that one. This case was strange. This woman's name's Deborah.
Nevada, 1987. In the middle of the night, Brett Oldham and his girlfriend Diane Swanson are awakened by a loud bang. The couple, who are expecting their first child, are shocked to see a number of what look like gray aliens surrounding their bed.
They don't knock.
Before we even had time to react to seeing the grays in the room, we were gone. They took us aboard the craft, they placed me on a table.
Man.
And placed her to my right, and they had her in a position much like women do when they get an exam from a gynecologist. I realized immediately what was happening, that they were taking the fetus.
I couldn't move. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't move anything. I could move my eyes to see, where he was at, and I could hear him screaming. That's when I realized they were doing something to me. We were just saying, please don't take my baby, don't hurt us.
According to Diane's account, the next morning she refused to believe the incident was more than just a terrible nightmare. But after finding traces of blood in her bed, she feared a miscarriage, and the couple went to see her doctor. When examined, Diane was found to have no tissue remaining in her womb, as if the fetus had been surgically removed.
He said, I've never seen anything like this before. Well, it was like this woman was never pregnant. I went in to clean the womb, and the womb was already cleaned.
Diane had been nearly 4 months pregnant at the time of this incident.
If you're referring to a case where we have ultrasonographic evidence that the fetus was present,
Wow.
and then sometime later, there's no more fetus, I would think that's strange. What you have here is a
That
ultrasonographic
is
image
a
of a
real
human
case.
fetus at about 3 months of gestation. If you measure the what we call crown to rump
You know what?
length,
I'm going
which
to
is
call
the
bullshit for a
longest
second.
distance from the head to the
Hold
butt.
on. Wait a minute. I just realized. They never said this doctor saw Deborah and confirmed that she did not have the baby and it's got these imaging and that he proved it. So stop, slow down. Let's go back and hear what he actually said.
That's about 3 months. I would think that's strange. We have
Okay, listen.
Diane had been nearly 4 months pregnant at the time of this incident.
If you're referring to a case where we have ultrasonographic evidence that
If you are referring to a case where, that's where he begins. If you are referring to a case where, and then he starts talking about this in the exact detail of what happened to Deborah, as if he saw it or gave his opinion about it, or was part of it, or even has seen her imaging. You know, so slow down, horsey. But the way they edit the film makes it seem like he's the one that knew it was real and saw it and witnessed the whole thing.
the fetus was present. And then sometime later, there's no more fetus. I would think that's strange. What you have here is a ultrasonographic image of a human fetus at about 3 months of gestation. If you measure the what we call crown to rump length, which is the longest distance from the head to the butt, that's about 5 to 6 centimeters. So that's roughly the size or the diameter of a baseball. Could the body absorb this fetus overnight? That's very unlikely.
How could the unborn child just disappear completely, without a trace? Is it possible that what Brett and Diane experienced the previous night really was more than just a bizarre dream?
Most of the time, we would explain that by saying that the patient had a miscarriage. But in the event that there was not much bleeding and there's not much passage of tissue, and yet the embryo was gone, I couldn't explain that.
So
We were both kind of stunned when we left the hospital that night, and
I'm looking at, details of a case and not specifically her case, and you don't need to see the end. But let's talk about what they're doing there. That would be, are they hybridizing? What are they doing with that embryo once they take it out? Are they taking it somewhere, of course? What would it be? Some type of reproductive facility. Maybe it's in New Mexico, underground in a basement that Epstein owns. It's about 8 layers deep, 1 layer below, S4. So, and it's connected by a high-speed rail that also has time-space portal technology. So it gets there even faster than faster. And it's all Elon Musk. It's boring stuff. So these are, talking about grays. I showed you that one drawing that I saw. Was it on this film? Yeah. I think it was here. Right there. That alien right there. That's, to me, that's what they looked like. But I remember their eyes, yeah. They were dark like that, but it's they still, their eyebrows move and they do blink. So it's not like those black parts just stick out like plastic goggles that don't move or show any life. But they do move, and it's almost like you can see them looking at something, like from parts on the inside. It's kind of like maybe they're what do they call that? They're sensitive, so that they can change their skin tone. Maybe they bring in them. Maybe they have melanin. Melanin. Yeah, melanin. That's another thing. When people say they're melanated, they should add another syllable. It's melaninated. Melaninated. Melanin. They say melanated. It's melanin, so melaninated. That's it. Melaninated. But this is the most accurate looking alien I've ever seen. A depiction of the, an illustration. It's not perfect, but the mouth was not as menacing or frowny. I don't know what it's kind of dark and pulled tight with the lips thing. There's less lips. It's just kind of a hole. They do have a pointy lip here. And they do have an upper and a bottom lip. But they're very, very small. Just like, think of halfway between a lip and an eyelid. That's how thick they are. And then the necks, let's see, that's about, what it looked like. And the width of the shoulders and everything. The head actually, it looks a little tall. I mean, the overall size here actually looks, I think this apex curve right here on the skull is a little bit shorter, a little bit more truncated. Like that. What else? These, I don't know, they could have different people amongst their race if they're not all clones that look exactly like each other. And they could be different ages, so they could have different features on their faces and not all be the same. And some may have had augmentation. But I was going to say this laugh line is really deep and goes all the way down to the jawbone. That's not necessarily on any of them. But somehow their faces, like I say, around this area, look small and like a baby. Like they're just straight-faced babies looking at you. But with huge eyes and a bigger head. But when I saw that, I went, wow. And I went back and went, rewind. Holy crap, that's accurate. That's the most accurate I've seen that reawakens more. I was 6 years old. So I had forgotten about that probably from, let's say, about a few weeks after it happened to 48 years later. My mother forbade talking about it. She was there. It happened in our front yard, and I told them to go get her, so they woke her up and brought her into the front yard. My mother said she doesn't remember how she got from her bed to being out walking in the yard. And she had her gown on out there first because I was in my room. She went first. I watched her spin up and light up all the colors underneath and then shoot up. Pew. Just pew. Like a bullet. And then out of sight. But there were two, and one was behind that one to the right, over toward the neighbor's backyard. And I saw two grays walking up a ramp on the right side, sticking out, going further into my backyard. On that side of the other saucer was a ramp where they were at an angle to where I could not even see inside the doorway on their ship that they were going into. Their doorway was facing the other way from me. And they're walking up into their craft. And they're leaving. And then they light up and take off. After my mother came back. And then, let's see. Yeah. And then my mother came and got me, said, I want you to meet someone, took my hand. I went out in the front yard. And there was the craft, and one of them was waiting. He had his hand on his hip like that, with his wrist upside down, his hand upside down on his hip. His palm up and his finger sticking back like a chicken wing. And he was waiting for me, and then she walked me up the ramp. But she let go of my hand, and she stayed on the grass. And I went in by myself. And then I just remember they showed me some things around the craft on the inside, like just to look around. And then we were looking at screens, what I thought were screens on the outside. But evidently I had sat in the chair, one of the chairs in the middle, with the panel, like a little desk panel in front of me for my hands. And there were symbols on the right side. And across, they went up. One of them showed, I remember, like an animation of the spooling or an indicator, just like we would read a gauge, digital or analog. It was digital, and it just would show you the intensity. I could tell that when it was spooling up into anti-gravity matter, to get into the interflux zone where they could move anywhere in space and time. And that's how I wonder if their speed is constant, because if they once they spool up and they're at that state, I think we see it if we've ever seen videos of it, when they have usually a flash of light or some way that you can tell they change consistency, and then usually within, you can count to about 1.5 seconds, and they go pew, off in some direction. Once they think of that direction, like let's say they think of Madrid, how many seconds does it take to get there, and what is there a speed limit, or does that all depend on on emotion, intensity, and direction of who's driving? It's weird, but I did kind of drive it as a conduit with the leader standing at my right. And I saw that I had a session. I had a regression and remembered that one time with a friend of mine. She regressed me, and I remembered sitting in the chair, and there were symbols. Their symbols are simple lines. They're not complex huts like in Chinese or any kanji type language. They're not even, or with circles, like Korean or the or others. Or which one is it that has the circles? I thought that was Korean. And then you had you've got Egyptian, but theirs might even be more complex than, these were just lines that were either straight, or they were curved, or they were hooked, or they were at a certain angle, or there were 1 or 2 or 3. There was a circle. And you could tell there were like sliders on the desk because they went up and down for intensity. I guess you touch which mechanical item you wanted to control on the craft, and then you had a slider on the right for your potentiometer. But the rest you could do, once it spooled up, the rest you could just do by hand and by mind. The ship becomes you. And you just drive it. Because I guess you as the driver, if you're in the energy field, don't you go into the same, if it's in anti-gravity, then it's not in our time with gravity. So they can go anywhere. But how long can you stay right there if you're in a human body? But I guess you transformed, so your energy at that point. It doesn't even have to be a second in human lifetime, right? It can only be what it is on the other side, on the human life side. The time keeps ticking. But let's say if you could go out and come back in a year's time of over there and come back in the same second in the human life. So it seems like you didn't even affect yourself if it already just happened before I finished the sentence, you know. Is there that kind of thing going on? Who would know? But I've been in that field. I wonder if I had that radiation. I don't think there's any radiation involved. It's just spinning a liquid metal at high velocity in a circle around a magnetic zone, and then using that flux energy that spits out of that to move the craft into a anti-gravity torus. It's what you do with it once you have that confuses me, because let's say, okay, now you've got your anti-gravity torus and you're glowing and you're spinning and you're going to shoot off in any direction. And then you put an actor in the chair that's a comedian all freaking out. Oh, what am I going to do? Shaking, all sweaty, in a one-piece jumper with crazy tennis shoes on. You know, I don't know which way to go. So what makes it take off in the right direction and go, like if they say, take me to a person, but you don't even know where that person is. So they're going to have to map it and by psyche and cosmic connection with their mind, their mind's vibration. I guess it's the vibrational wave that would identify them, like their fingerprint. So they follow it to your destination, or to the subject that you want's destination, by that vibrational energy that one puts out. What was it I was just reading the other day, that they found that soldier by his heartbeat? If they can do that now with human technology, can you imagine what the Greys could do with the technology? That's probably where the technology came from. And think about it. Wow, that's really pretty true, isn't it? If they read, let's say they had a recording meter when they first met a child or a person, and they measured whatever they needed off of the heart to get all the proper vibrational readings. And then they went back, let's say 20 years later, and they wanted to find that person as an adult. They can just play back the recording from 20 years ago and then transpose that into another transmittance and then put on your mixer with it. But you would find the guy or the gal, and that would probably be the way to do it. I'm just thinking scientifically in my head how I would do it, but it seems like that's how they do it. If you're watching, please say hi in the chat. Give me a subject to talk about, ask a question, start a conversation. Other than that, I think I've been on about an hour. I showed you the videos that I wanted to show you, the stories that I wanted to show you. There was one story, though, that, not that one. I don't like, some of those have the AI voice. That drives me crazy. Where are the 3 cases? Not that, not that. The 3 incredible, yeah. You have this 3rd one.
And then in the center of this room,
he used the word invasion, but he meant it in a friendly way. He said it would be the showing of themselves completely. The public should consider in their minds that they should have no fear of these beings because they are not hostile. They told him that they have some ability to manipulate time, slow it down, halt it, or speed it up. They said that they had a, quote, breeding analysis program and had contacted other people for this. They said that our military was hostile to them and had attempted to chase them and shoot down their craft, and for this reason their contacts were done randomly. They said, quote, Earth people do not do things in the right way. They also said, one day, Watchmen, you will see the universe as we have. Towards the end of the visit, the ET said, Watchmen, come with me, and they exited the craft. The ET said, "Watchman, what you have seen and what you have heard, you will not remember. The only thing you will remember is you've seen something land and something take off." The ET instructed him, "I wish you would not tell that you have been aboard this ship. You are to tell that the ship landed below the intersection of the highways, that you approached, and it shot up into the air and disappeared. You will tell this and nothing more. You will not speak wisely about this night. We will return to see you 2 more times." During this entire onboard experience, 2 other ETs were walking back and forth in a kind of military fashion, is how Herbert described it. So he was led to the exit. The ET placed his hand on Herbert's shoulder. Herbert exited the craft. He saw 2 ETs had remained outside and now climbed back in. Herbert returned to his cruiser, and as the craft took off, the entire onboard segment of the encounter left his conscious mind. Now I'd like to play a 4-minute, 40-second long tape recording of where Herbert describes all this.
And lo and behold, I've never seen anything like it before in my life, with so many different types of instrument panels and computer type things that you just wouldn't believe it. This cone thing was right in the center of the floor. You could see half of it from on top and half of it from the bottom, but it gave off a red glow that sort of not flashed, but kind of died down and then came back up again. And he says, "Watchman, come with me." And we walked over to a screen that was up on the side, I say wall. It was sort of like a TV screen, and he pressed some buttons and I guess flipped some switches. I wasn't paying too much attention to him. I was looking at the screen, and some stars in the sky appeared on there. And he put his finger up like this, and he said, "This is where we're from, Watchman." And then he put his hand back down. He didn't say where, and he didn't say the name. He just pointed. The purpose that we're here is to get electricity. And there was another being standing a little distance away, and the man turned to him, and they both looked at each other, and he started depressing buttons. And he says, "Watch, Watchman." And there was this antenna on the outside of the spacecraft which angled toward a power unit, and this bolt went out, a color I've never seen before in my life. I don't even think I could describe it. Went out and came back, and this stayed like this for about 3 minutes, and then it went off. And he turned and looked at me, and I felt as I was getting an awful lot of roll of input of words that I couldn't understand. And he reached up and he touched me on the shoulder, and he felt real when he touched me. And I think at that time I did touch him, and he felt real to me. And he says, "Watchman, come with me." We walked back over to the exit, I'll say, where we came up, and the glass sheet came down again, and we went up into the third part of the craft, which was the observation deck, he said. And as we stepped off, he said, "Watchman, come with me." And we walked over, and we were standing there looking out of a big plate glass window type thing, and there was a control panel right in front of it, and there were 2 chairs that looked like dentist chairs. You know, I've been to the dentist chair, but really a superstructure of a chair, better than a dentist chair.
Where's the
we
gray?
looked out the window, and I could see this one being walking back and forth by where my patrol car was. And I think I said, "Wow." And he didn't. He turned to me, and he said something I don't understand. And he said some more things that I didn't understand or couldn't make out. And I still don't. And then he pointed his hand toward the plate glass window, as I say, refer to the stars out there. And he says to me, "Watchman, one day you yourself will see the universe as I have." And he reached up and he touched me on the shoulder, like this, like grabbing you on the shoulder, like a man does, to steer you away. And he says, "Come with me, Watchman." And then he stopped, and he said, "Watchman," and I turned around like this to look at him, and it felt like I was getting more input of something that I couldn't understand. Then he says, "Watchman, come with me." We walked over, and we went down all the way out of the craft. As we got outside, this other being started walking back toward the spacecraft and boarded it as we were walking toward my patrol car. And we stopped right by the patrol car, and I turned to look at him, and he was looking at me. And then again, it felt like I was receiving an input of words of some kind that I couldn't understand. And he sort of lifted his hand, and then he turned and walked back to the spacecraft, floated up inside. This catwalk thing started spinning. The lights started flashing off and on. This red orangish glow came out from beneath it. It started lifting up in the air, and I guess it got about 100 feet high and just shot straight out of sight. Let me tell you, I was scared. I started feeling me again.
Herbert Schirmer's story was widely printed in magazines, newspapers, and books. Perhaps the most complete coverage was in Ralph and Judy Bloom's book, Beyond UFOs. Leo Sprinkle, who conducted the initial hypnosis session, was convinced of Herbert's honesty and said that he was, quote, sincere and telling the truth as he saw it. Now, despite the ET's promise to return, they told him they'd return by the end of 1968, Herbert never reported any return visits. As he said, I never saw anything again. Maybe he did see them and just didn't talk about it, considering the backlash that he suffered. The Condon Committee reached a negative conclusion about the existence of UFOs, and regarding Herbert Schirmer's experience, one Condon investigator wrote, quote, the patrolman seemed quite sincere in presenting his report. Despite this, the Condon Committee ruled that Schirmer's case was, quote, psychological. They wrote, and I quote, evaluation of psychological assessment tests, the lack of any evidence, and interviews with the patrolman left project staff with no confidence that the troopers' reported UFO experience was physically real. Now, Herbert, for some time, did remain vocal about his experience, always maintaining that it did happen. But eventually he just shut up. He was very badly ridiculed, but he did refuse to back down. He knew he was telling the truth, and he was determined to tell the truth.
I went to my father and I said, Dad, I said...
Hold on, but see, his alien had like a earpiece over its ear, like as if it hears with its ear, or that actually is its ear, or that's all that it hears with. I'm sure it's an ear. They just have a hole, don't they? There's no outer part. But it only had the headset on one side of its head, kind of like people when they wear it over one ear and the other pad they put somewhere on their face or on the back of their head or on top of their head. And he's got an antenna up there. He's in some kind of spacesuit that looks all muscular, like he's a superhero or Avenger or something. And then he suddenly has a one-ear headset on, like with an antenna and a green light, you know, the 70s electronics.
I know you have 20-something years in the Air Force, but
50s
I asked my father point blank, I said, Dad, what do you think of UFOs? My father never said no, and he never said yes. He just said, son, if you're telling the truth, stick with it. And so I stuck with it. I thank you very much.
As Herbert says, there might be a lot of people who have had similar experiences who are afraid to admit it. Herbert Schirmer died in 2017. He was 72 years old. What an amazing case that is. I like it for a number of reasons. We have a very good witness that lighted the whole area. Now the light had changed to a bluish color, similar to an electric arc welder. I tried to get up, but could not rise. I had no strength. And a strange thing, my legs would not respond. I was on my knees. But for some reason, amount of ridicule and pushback following his experience, even accusations of a hoax, which I think are unfounded, as we'll get into, but definitely an important and early case. This last case occurred in October of 1973. At that time, there was a massive wave of UFO and humanoid encounters sweeping across the United States and
when you see
world.
a double L, it's
Truck driver Dionisio
like
Yanka, age 25, of Bahia Blanca, Argentina, had no knowledge of this wave or what he was about to experience as he
I
began a
lived in
2-day drive
Argentina.
from Bahia Blanca to Rio Gallegos in Argentina. He was carrying a load of building materials, and inspecting his truck before the trip, he did notice that one of his rear tires was underinflated, but for some reason, he decided to ignore it and begin his trip. At first, his journey was uneventful, but around 12:45 a.m. on October 28, 1973, as he traveled along Highway 3, he passed under some high-tension wires, crossed the railroad tracks near Bordeaux, when he could feel the rear tire had become much worse. So he pulled over and began to change the tire. It was now 1:15 a.m. and the road was deserted. And as Dionisio says, all at once the road was illuminated with an intense yellow light. Because of the color, I thought it might be the headlights of a Peugeot, and I continued with my work. A few seconds passed, and I had my shoulder to the light, but it became so bright that it lighted the whole area. Now the light had changed to a bluish color similar to an electric arc welder. I tried to get up, but could not rise. I had no strength, and a strange thing, my legs would not respond. I was on my knees. I wanted to get up and look towards the woods that grew along one side of the road. Then I saw a great thing in the form of a plate suspended in the air and 3 persons at my shoulders looking at me. I tried once more to get up, but could not. The paralysis became total, and I could not even talk. So per Dionisio, the saucer was yellow on the top section, kind of
He may
purplish
walk
on the bottom section, and
or talk.
meanwhile, these 3 people stared at him fixedly. As Dionisio says, there were 2 men and a woman, the woman in the center.
Dionisio.
I could see she was a woman because I could see the outline of her breasts and the long, fair hair which reached halfway down her back. The men, too, were blond, with their hair combed back. They were all dressed alike, very tight-fitting, leaden gray colored one-piece suits, 3/4-length boots of a yellow color. They had long gloves of the same yellow color, and these reached halfway up their arms. They wore neither belts nor helmets nor anything else. They had no weapons. Their faces were like ours, but they had great wide foreheads and elongated eyes, like those of the Japanese, a little tilted and slightly protuberant. They were talking together in a language that was
Yeah.
impossible to understand. It had no vowels and sounded like a badly tuned
What if-
radio.
What if these are the avatars for the Greys? You know, so the Greys, they go in, they get in a unit, or they connect themselves into a tank. Maybe they submerge themselves in a fluid, or they go on a tube that looks like a hyperbaric chamber, like on Avatar. But it's the gray alien getting in the machine on Avatar and laying down. And then in their dream, they get to be one of these beautiful mannequins that they've picked up out of our society meme of what is beautiful. You know, so they've created these mannequins that they can parade around in, and they actually become those beings. And then they go out and visit people, and they're not as afraid of them. And then they even try to talk to them. Like Travis Walton saw one with like a fishbowl on his head as a helmet, maybe for atmospheric reasons. And he went and tried to talk to it, but it just looked at him. It never said anything, but he followed it, and it took him through some passageways to a place where he got healed. So it was like the Greys brought him to these people. Who are these people? They're always tied into the Greys. Well, in Travis Walton's case, they are. And some others in Europe, I believe. And definitely in South America. In South America, not only this guy Dionisio, there was one in Chile. I lived in Chile for 6 months as a busker in Santiago, in Bella Vista, near Baquedano Station, near the obelisk. And I had an apartment right there in the towers, 21st floor over the GAM Theater. Some pretty popular apartment buildings down there. They look like 21 stories tall. I had the penthouse. Well, I shared it with 2 other guys. But I was going to tell you, they have a lot of stories in Chile about these types. that appear. They're in the mountains. I think these beautiful Nordic types, they have bases in South America, in Chile. One restaurant owner was telling me, manager, he was telling me about a story in Chile about a man who was taken and had a terminal disease like cancer, and then it was healed when he came back. But he was gone for, I think, a number of days, and his family was searching for him, just like the Travis Walton story. And when he came back, he was healed. And isn't it coincidence that also in the Travis Walton case, he was taken and healed? And so are the South American Chileans that I've heard of that go. So anyway, what I'm telling you is, in my personal experience from people who've told me in Chile, there is a high amount of alien encounters with these types. Not as much, more of these types than the grays. They see these beautiful types. That's why I want to move to Chile. Let me start it back up.
With squeaky, sharp notes. Now, he says the beings were about 5.5 feet tall, and they continued to stare at Dionisio for a full 5 minutes, he said, until suddenly taking action. As Dionisio says, one of them seized me by the collar and pulled me upright forcibly, but without violence. I tried to speak, but my voice would not come. While the one who had pulled me up held me, the other man put a device to the base of the index finger of my left hand. I got a good look at the device. It looked like a battery-operated electric shaver, and it had a nozzle which they applied to me for a few seconds. It did not hurt. When they took it away, I had 2 drops of blood on my finger. I think I fainted then, because I don't remember anything else. Now, as all of this was happening, he was thinking to himself, or crying out, "Who are you people? What?"
How did he get pricked? The picture showed him getting something done under his chin or his jawbone. And then he's got blood on his finger from a finger prick. I missed a part somehow. Let me rewind.
Do you want? Fainted then. And it had a nozzle which they had put a device to the base of the index finger of my left hand. I got a good look at the device. It looked like a battery-operated electric shaver.
And then the picture, they're showing him holding something under his jaw, and they're saying shaver. You know what? This is an AI-generated picture, I bet, and that's why that hand is there, because AI got confused just like I did, and they're drawing his hand like he's shaving him. You get it? I bet that's why I got confused, because AI generated it.
It had a nozzle which they applied to me for a few seconds. It did not hurt. When they took it away, I had 2 drops of blood on my finger.
That's funny, I just caught that.
I think I fainted then, because I don't remember anything else. Now, as all of this was happening, he was thinking to himself, or crying out, "Who are you people? What do you want? Please don't do anything to me. You can take the truck and my money." He had a considerable amount of money in the truck at the time. The next thing Dionisio knew, 1 or 2 hours had passed. It was now 2 or 3 a.m., and he was lying on the ground miles away inside the corral of the Sociedad Rural de Bahia Blanca. He was so disoriented that not only did he not know where he was, he could not remember his truck, his home, he couldn't even remember his own name. He felt very cold and nauseous. He did see a highway off in the distance, so he pulled himself to his feet and walked towards it. He said he had a really bad headache. He was looking for the police. He was absolutely disoriented. Around this time, he was found by a man who wondered if perhaps Dionisio had been in some sort of car accident. The man did call the police. Dionisio's next conscious memory was waking up in a hospital bed in a room at the municipal hospital in Bahia Blanca. And he learned from authorities that he had been found wandering around and weeping and asking what town he was in. He was unable to remember anything about his past whatsoever, still could not remember his own name. Doctors confirmed his state of amnesia and were puzzled, as he showed no signs of any injury. So Dionisio suffered from this amnesia for almost 3 days, until one morning he woke up and spontaneously his memory of his life returned, but he did not yet recall what had happened during the missing time. He did eventually go home, but was so traumatized that he later went back to the...
You know, I wonder if the aliens can time the amount of time that you forget the memory of what they did. You know, like when they told that black man that was rolling the tire in the 50s and got in that old town where they're like, "Hey man, what's your name? Didn't we see you come out of a flying saucer?" But I wonder if they can time. And they told him, "You're only going to remember seeing the saucer and then us as we left, but you're not going to remember everything I just told you." Why would they tell him? It's kind of like a James Bond movie. Why did they tell all the secrets of what they did when they think they've won, and when they get blown up in the end? You know. But it's like this. Why did the alien tell him stuff, and then say you're not going to remember any of this? It's like they did it for a reason. Why did they tell him that either it influences the brain? Maybe even though, see, we have the suppressed memory, we react in our life as if we know this knowledge and we acknowledge this knowledge. That's a thought, isn't it? And that's a circular logic right there in some way.
The hospital, and finally doctors decided to try hypnosis. On November 6, about 9 days
Say hello if
after
you're in
his
the
encounter,
chat or if you're watching the video.
Dionycio was given sodium
Welcome
pentothal
at 1
truth
a.m.
serum and was placed under
1:09
hypnotic
a.m.
regression. There was a
Monday.
whole panel of doctors working with him. 4 sessions were held, and in each one, Dionysio's story remained fully consistent. It took a while to get out the details, but he did remember what happened. Dionisio says that he found himself being floated into the craft, quote, by means of a light, on a ray of light. He says he almost just walked up this beam of light. He found himself inside this craft, which had silver gray walls and floor. He said that there was a large round window, and outside he could see that the craft had extended what looked like a cable to the power lines, apparently to recharge their craft. Researchers did later confirm that power consumption in the area of the encounter was inexplicably higher than normal. Dionisio said, looking outside, he also saw another tube leading from the craft down into a small lake. And as Dionisio says, there are many devices, many of them. 2 viewing screens, and 1 stars can be seen. In another screen he could see the earth. He saw that they had taken his lighter, his pack of cigarettes, and his watch, which were lying on a table in the craft. All of these were returned to him with the exception of his lighter. The 3 beings that were with him began to speak to him, he thinks telepathically or using some kind of electronic device, he's not sure. They told him not to be afraid, that they are friends, that they have been here for a long time, and that they had come from far, according to one report, from outside our galaxy. When he questioned them more about it, they refused to be specific and just told Dionisio, as he says, they say that it is their secret. They told him that they had been visiting the Earth since 1950, and during this time, they had been taking samples from Earth and studying human behavior. They said that they did this for 10 years, concentrating mostly on taking samples only, but around 1960 began to contact humans directly. And one of their goals was to establish contact with people to determine if people were adaptable and capable of being transported on their craft to their world should the need arise. As Dionisio says, they wish to learn if we can live in their world. They explained that some of their kind were living among the human population on our planet, and he was told that they contacted him in particular because he was a simple and good man without any problems. They said that possibly they would return for another contact and perhaps take him with them. He did recall the beings talking to each other periodically in a language that sounded to him like a buzzing noise. And under hypnosis, Dionisio said, I have a message from the beings in the craft, but I can't tell you what it is. No matter what you or any
nice
other Earth
artwork.
scientists do, there will remain a memory lapse while I was on the ship.
Looks like
I
a
was there
stripper
for 40
stage.
to 45 minutes. Now we do now know what this message is, and it regards the future of our planet. As Dionisio says, these people said that our planet is bound to suffer very grave catastrophes if our behavior continues as it is at present. The last thing Dionisio recalled on the craft was the woman placing her hand under his left eye, and then he passed out. Doctors did later confirm finding a small scratch there. They also found a mark on his hand where the instrument was placed that apparently took a blood sample at the beginning of his encounter. And in fact, both these marks would remain visible for the rest of Dionysio's life. The last thing Dionisio recalled was descending slowly to the ground, and as he was placed on the ground, the ETs told him that they would return for him, and he passed out. When he woke up, he realized that he had complete amnesia, again to the point that he did not even know his own identity. Now, in the days that followed, Dionisio had repeated nightmares about the encounter, and while hypnosis brought the memories back, he still remained pretty traumatized. One of the doctors, a psychiatrist by the name of Eduardo Mata, says, and I quote, "I believe that something tremendous happened to Dionisio Yanka that night, something fantastic and terrible." Another one of the doctors, Dr. Eladio Santos, said, and I quote, "Dionisio told what he thinks he experienced. We possess no means of proving that Yanka was not inside a flying object, nor do we possess a technique capable of proving that he was. Dionisio Yanka, under hypnosis and pentothal, always told the same story, and that story is that he was inside a flying saucer with two tall men with short blonde hair and a woman with..."
Hold on. Wasn't sodium pentothal the drug that they used to make people tell the truth? And you see pictures of black and whites in the 50s where they would sit them in a chair and stick a needle in their vein, in their artery, and in the vein, and then inject sodium pentothal as a truth drug? Or was that the drug for the death, lethal injection? Kidding. I don't think it was sodium pentothal. It makes sense with what they're saying here. So they put in truth serum with what was it? Let me back up.
Pentothal, always told inside a flying object, nor do we possess a technique capable of proving that he was. Dionisio Yanka, under hypnosis and pentothal, always told the same story, and that story is that he was inside a flying saucer with two tall men with short blonde hair and a woman with long blonde hair. These beings were wearing silvery clothing and talking among themselves in a language that sounded like the buzzing of bees in a hive, and that they promised to return. Ultimately, Dionisio was not happy by the way the doctors treated him. He said he was treated like a guinea pig, and finally, he just left. He said, tired of being injected with pentothal, the so-called truth serum, and the problems that remembering all that caused
thank you.
me,
He just
I
answered
decided
me.
to escape, to never appear again. Dionisio suffered badly from the attention and ridicule heaped upon him by those around him, especially the press.
I've never heard of this
Before long, there
case.
were accusations of fraud, that he and one of the doctors were collaborating in the hopes of making money from his story. Dionisio denied this and stuck to his story, and arguing against the hoax theory is that Dionisio never accepted or received any funds for his story. Nor did the accusers ever identify themselves, nor did they provide any evidence whatsoever of any fraud. And apparently, an investigation showed that the accusations stemmed from reporters who were attempting to get first-hand information.
The thing is about taking money for your story, when it's true, and it actually happened, is that because you're sponsored now by them, they're going to make you change your story. And that's why there's nothing wrong with taking money and selling your story. If you want to, that's great. But what's going to happen is, for some reason, there are going to be people, and there always are, and they come out and they're going to say, we don't want you, that one thing you say about the craft being able to fly through buildings and through matter, and like right through mountains and through the ocean without even splashing. Can you take that part out? Just don't talk about that anymore. And like say that you saw one blow up when it hit the water, so you don't believe the other ones are true, that the military is, you can throw disinformation out there, and you may have a sponsor that's a disinformation sprinkler, and you get assigned a project, and you're going to have to lie and cover up your story and take out the true parts and turn it into a misinformation thing where people start to follow you, and then they get. This has happened to Alex Jones as an example. He'll take you 85% of the way and wake up people who want to know what all the conspiracies are and what everybody's talking about and what's this rabbit hole all about and what are the stories in it. And I'm going to dive in and learn all about them and see which ones I think are true. And then you use up Alex Jones to where he's not of any use anymore, unless you just love to tune into him as part of your schedule every morning, like our AM radio show. Then there's no reason for him as anything interest as new content or factoids or anything going on with his commentary, because he'll say things that are absolutely a lie that he knows aren't true. You know, like I'll give you one example that was the absolute last straw when I quit watching anything he put out. I had already quit watching him years before then. Orlando Pulse night shooting of the nightclub with the gay bar, the gay nightclub in Orlando. It was called Pulse. Remember that one? That was when, gosh, my spidey sense says that. This is 26. That was 8 years ago. Is that 2018? 2019. But they, or was it before that? Are we talking maybe 2017, 2018? But around then. So anyway, when that happened, Alex Jones went to he was in his home, and it looked like he was in the shower. But he had these curtains draped around him where he was in a small space, like the size of a 3-person shower. And he was saying, and it was late at night. It was like 10:30, 11 at night. And he's saying, I'm not in my office. I had to get him on here. And I want to tell people about that the frogs are turning gay. And not only that, but I've got inside information that this is Al-Qaeda. The Orlando Pulse attack was planned. And I know the sources. I got the materials. I know who the bosses were. I know how they did it. I mean, I'm telling you, this guy, my source, he gave me every detail. I'm going to tell you about it tomorrow on my show. So be sure and turn in tomorrow on my show. I'm going to tell you everything about this Al-Qaeda attack on the Orlando Pulse nightclub for the homosexuals in Orlando, Florida. Thank you. You know, and he was, that's my Alex Jones impression. I should go out and start doing that on stage. My voice has to be just at the right dryness to do it. It's called frying your voice. Vocal fry. Yeah, but Alex Jones, he talks like his voice is really high normally. But anyway, Alex Jones said that, and we know Orlando Pulse nothing happened there. The shooter was an SG4 crisis actor who changed his name, or he sold his house to his sister for $1 before the alleged attack. The parking lot that they showed around this little building was, it had like 8 parking spaces in front and another 10 in the back or less. It was this tiny little parking lot in this tiny little building, and nobody was there. And on the film, they kept showing these junkets of these guys. Remember, there were four young men carrying a 5th one who allegedly looked like he'd been injured on his right knee or something, and they're carrying him down the sidewalk away out of danger, right? And they're taking him out of the club away into. That's what you think. You see them, they're just walking down the sidewalk carrying a man. Well, that was shot by other people who turned in their cell phone camera footage they put the guy down after they got about 100 feet away. They put him down, and some cameras were still on him, and he looked and he goes, oops, and he laid back down, and they picked him up and they started carrying him again. But he was going to walk off, and they thought they were done shooting that scene. And then it showed the weird guy who's a little overweight with the hat, who was in several scenes. He was like the main crisis actor that was jumping in and bombing every camera take. And he's in all of them. The guy with the little fedora hat on. Remember him? And those were crisis actors, because you know what? When they were walking out in that scene where they're carrying the guy, you're looking at them and they're going from left to right across your screen. And if you look across the street, down the street, about a block and a half down the street, is the Orlando Pulse street sign lit up, all the neon lights. That's Orlando Pulse. Down the block on the other side of the street, and they're walking towards it, actually. So what's actually happening is you're watching these people being filmed on the sidewalk in front of probably some kind of government building that has a front door, a glass, front door, and a lobby, and they're able to use that in there as their triage center to get ready for the drill. And everybody gets their makeup and their blood packets there, and they be sure and use this as a tourniquet. Okay, here's your blood packet. Then they hire people that don't have limbs, that have had amputations, and then they put prosthetic legs on them, and then they show the leg all bloodied up and eviscerated with the bone exposed, coming off the stump of this person who has already been amputated as a SG4 actor with amputations. They like that because they can use you for tricks and mind illusions, just like David Copperfield. It's mind illusions. I'm talking about hoaxes and false flags and things. I'm talking about the fake events that are acted out, like the 6th of that month in the Capitol. They showed people, come on, they were painting their faces, wearing hats with horns. Some guys were rappelling down the building with a rope. Others they had signs and all kinds of painted up signs and costumes on. And I heard one crisis actor was reported saying that he got cash to come and whatever, to be dressed for it. And then they promised them that when they got there, they would be supplied with anything they wanted or needed as far as rope, colors, paint, arts, crafts, poster board, wood, saws, whatever you needed. And that's how they did it. And then, they would always have a calendar and tell you, go here at this date. And sometimes it would be just acting out as a pedestrian around a repaired manhole or something. You would have just weird jobs. But then a lot of these crisis actors have been traced to multiple events, and they've been caught. So anyway, so Alex Jones tied that to Al Qaeda somehow. It was their master plot, their masterminded plot to obliterate all the people in a gay nightclub in Orlando called Pulse. All the way from the Middle East, they were going to come over and get rid of Pulse nightclub. Maybe some sheikh's nephew was in there and got raped by a boyfriend or something, and this is revenge. But it didn't happen, and that's what happened. We didn't go there and shoot anybody. Nobody got killed there, and that's the way it happened. So like Buzz Aldrin, when the little girl interviews him, and she says, "Why didn't we go back to the moon?" He says, "That's not a little girl's question. It's my question, because we didn't go there, and that's we didn't." Whatever he said. Yeah. But you know what? That's not a clear confession. That people that attach that, and I'm off the subject, but if you're listening, you stay with me. You've seen the interview with the little girl and Buzz Aldrin, and they say that he admitted that we did not go to the moon. But it's not true, because he left a dangling modifier there, and it's open passage to double meaning. because he said, maybe you could hear it already, but when he says, because the way he paused and he put his hand up on his chest with the body language and the pause, he interrupted one thought and went into another. You know what I mean? So he goes, if you just read it, he says, because we didn't go there and because we didn't, that's the way it is. Then you read that and you think, oh, well, that's what he said. Wow, he did. But you had to watch his body language because he paused and he goes, well, it's because we. And the question was, why didn't we go back? And he's saying, yeah, we didn't. Why did? And he's talking about a project of going back to the moon and, assembling the teams and working on the telemetry and the people working on the craft and the people trying to find the crew. And you have to get the operations set up and hire all of your people and launch your project and then manage it all the way to completion. And that's what he's describing when he says we didn't go and do that, But why didn't we go? But because we didn't go. And he could have meant back. Even though he didn't say back, he just says, because we didn't go. She says, why didn't we go back? And he says, that's my question too. Why didn't we go? He didn't have to say back. And he paused and he goes, about this long, he goes, and that's my question, because we didn't go. And, and then whatever he said, and people said, look at that, he just confessed. But he could be referring to the fact that we didn't go back because we didn't go. Why don't you think we didn't go? And he's like, yeah, that's my, and then he's referring, and then he's also turning around the point of view of the question itself when he says, that's my question. And now you got to turn the point of view away from you to him saying, because we didn't go. He's referring to him already thinking we should have gone again. We should have gone again. I tried to get them to go and they wouldn't go and we didn't go. Go, go, go. Like, go, go, go back. Well, what are you doing? Go, go, go. And I was there. I tried and we didn't go. Does he have to say back? No. So he left it open. I don't know what you would say that in proper, if I had an English grammar, someone with a doctorate in English grammar to tell me the actual persons I'm talking about in my direction of speech. And I would think it's, I know it's first person and third person narrative, but as far as the thought goes, is it passive or active voice, or what is it that changes when Buzz Aldrin says, that's my question, because we didn't pause, go, and that's why, then he's kind of big pauses that each one could be the beginning of a different sentence, and you don't know where he's going. And he says, that's my question, because we didn't go. Go. Come on, wake up, everybody, go. Do it again. What do you slow down? Why didn't you go back? Go. And nobody would go back. The way he was thinking of it as overlooking a project. Look at that perspective. You're him. You're overlooking this project that never got started. It never became tangible, and nobody went. No, it didn't go. We didn't go. I tried to get him to go back, and they were talking about maybe some dates, and then we didn't go. No, he's talking about the dates that we didn't go. We didn't go. You know what I mean? So I don't think grammatically that Buzz Aldrin admitted, even if he did it obliviously or subconsciously or intentionally, on that day when he said, because we didn't go. And that's, where's the, let me pull it up here real quick. Let's use one of these. I'm not going to use that one. Let's see. Buzz little girl. Right here.
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if
See, so let's play it
it
again.
didn't, I think I know. Because we didn't.
And then he says, but I think I know. So he's realizing something. Because we didn't. It's like we didn't put together a team and go back, right? We didn't go. Does he have to say back? Because we didn't go back. Or, you know, we tried to get a team. I was trying to get it to go, and nobody would go. And it didn't go. You know, it depends on your tone and your meaning of how you convey the message. When he says they didn't go, it could be the project go back. We didn't go back.
Go there, and that's.
But then also the way he puts his hand on his chest, isn't that a Freemasonic sign of the hidden hand? And also a sign of loyalty to the Brotherhood when you put your hand on the chest? Watch.
That's the way it happened. No, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and
see, he just says because we didn't go there. And he puts his hand over his heart. That's seen very frequently in Freemasonic rituals and meetings. So that's important. And the fact that he made that sign right when he said it, because we didn't go there.
and that's the way it happened.
And that's the way it happened. What is it? Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. So he's saying, she says, why didn't we go there? He says, that's my question, little girl. That's not a girl's question. That's my question because, but then he says, but I think I know why. Because we didn't go there. And that's the way it happened. The weird part is when he says, that's the way it happened. I'm analyzing every sentence.
If it didn't happen, I know. It's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know.
But I think I know.
Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And
he actually said, because we didn't go there. So what I'm trying to be his defender here and say, he meant the project to go back. Didn't go there. Because we didn't go there. I mean, we were going to do missions 18 nights. Some people say there were missions 17 and 18. Those are fake, though. They try to draw you in and say that they went to space even more times than they announced. With Apollo all the way up to 18 or 21, some people say. But if they were never in space to begin with, and it's all in a Hollywood basement, which we know, then what are they talking about? And now they're trying to prove to us that they're going to space and with the Artemis 2, which I've already found so many glitches and errors and CGI mistakes and proofs of gravity, Victor's watch falling, the Jeremy laying on those O2 jackets and smushing them as they jiggle around when he moves with gravity, and he's holding his head up to keep his blood above his heart while he's laying on his side, which is that's a sign and a tell when the astronauts are on their side, but their head is tilted up to keep their blood from rushing to their head. Okay, what else were we going to look at? Oh, we're going back to this guy, the Argentine. That's a pretty neat story.
Information on the case from doctors and from
I also noticed that it's also in that area of South America where Argentina and Chile are side by side with each other down there. That's all there is in South America. The tip, the pointy part going down is Argentina's on the right side of the map and Chile's on the left side of the map. And so as you go down, you got the Andes Mountains going up the middle. Argentina's portion is way bigger than Chile's. Chile's more narrow. But if this guy saw these, the beautiful blonde beings, then he's also in the same area. If there are tons of these stories about the beautiful blonde beings in Chile, and he's in an area in Bahia Blanca that is south of, I believe, Cordoba, isn't it? Bahia Blanca means White Bay, so Bahia Blanca. But anyway, he's in an area that I would understand if there were Nordic looking or the beautiful blonde ones in Chile a lot, then it's probably the same group that got Dionisio here in this encounter in Argentina, because that's not very far away. That's just across the mountain ridge. You know, it's the same as the Rocky Mountains and the Andes. It's all part of the same mountain ring and range.
Dionisio himself, but were denied access. Now, further investigations showed that the fraud accusations themselves were fraudulent. APRO's Argentinian representative, Liria Di Joragui, did a follow-up investigation, talked to the doctors, listened to the hypnosis tapes, and came to the conclusion that Dionisio was telling the truth and that the reports about a book or a money-making scheme or a hoax were simply not true. In further confirmation of the case, local newspapers reported that an Argentine airbase near Bahia Blanca reported seeing a UFO on anonymity. He was very unhappy with the way he was treated, especially by reporters, and as he says, they defamed me and used me. So he just disappeared into
the newspaper says, lo mejor sin memoria. They left him without memory.
Obscurity for decades, and it wasn't until 2023 that he granted interviews with researchers again and told them, why did all this have to happen to me? Why? The truth is, I don't like to remember. I had a worse time with the people from Earth than with the people from there.
Look. Did you notice something? Look how they spelled his name, Yanka. Oh, with a Y. You know why that is? Because I lived in Argentina. This happens all the time. Remember his name spelled with a double L? And I told you in the beginning? It's Yanka, and I told you how to pronounce it like a Y. Yanka. Because people in the States, when they see Yanka or anybody that crosses a border, their name starts with a double L. Or like Vallejo, they'll say Vallejo. Vallejo is how you say it. Think of the double L always as a Y. There's never an L sound in Spanish when you see a double L. It's always a Y sound. Always. There's never an L sound when you see a double L. Think of tortilla, or amarillo would be amarillo. It's not really amarillo, it's amarillo. Yanka would be double L, Yanka. But when Argentines, they go Shanka. Oh, your name is Yanka, Shanka. Se llama Shanka. Shanka. No me she. You know, they always put that the SH sound on it. And they do the same thing with their double L. So if they said, what's the guy's name? Shanka. Oh, okay. And they wrote it down with the Y. Or somebody could have said, what's his name? Shanka. And they wrote it down with the double L. And people get that back and forth all the time, and you have to correct them. Say, no, it's with the Y, or no, it's with the double L. Oh, thank you.
I had a worse time with the people from Earth than with the people from there. If the same thing happened to me again, I'd keep it to myself. I wouldn't tell anyone, not in a million years. Dionisio passed away on May 31st, 2024. He was 76 years old. As you can see, that was an encounter
That's Preston Dennett. Who was the guy that was narrating a minute ago? That's that anthropologist that has the I haven't seen his channel for a minute. Wow, what's his name? He does a lot of stories about ancient history, anthropology. Basically, he tells about like the origins of the sun cults and all of the species. It goes all the way back, to the Khazarians and the Judaic Khazarians after Bulan. Have you ever heard of the Empire of Bulan? That's interesting. If you want to know a part of missing history that puts the pieces together, where the Rothschilds came from, they're actually the Khazarian Bulan artifacts from the sun-worshipping area of Persia. When they were cast out for being sun worshippers and told they had to join either Christianity, Islam, or this was in 1000 AD. Islam had been established in 600 AD. Christianity was in year 33. Actually, it was in the year 300 after the Council of Nicaea, when it was all brought together in the year 324, when they made the first 54 books of the Bible. I won't get into that. I should do another video on it. But I was talking about time. 1,000 years. So then you had Bulan. He became the emperor of this Persian empire in Khazaria that were Baal worshiping, blood sacrificing pagans, right? And they were told they were conquered by the people from the Russian area, and they were from Kiev area. And they were told to either join one of the three Abrahamic religions. And so what they posed a question to each one of the religions, and they said, if you had to choose one of the other two, which would you choose? And the Jews won the contest. So Bulan converted the whole empire into Judaism, and they became the Judaic Khazarians. So they're not actually, when you talk about, Semites, take that word from Shem, who was a son of Noah, or the son of Noah. So if you can trace your lineage through Shem, you're Shem, Semite. So that means your lineage comes from son of Noah. That, when people say Semite. But these others who are the Rothschilds are not, because they're from the Persian, Khazarian, Judaic converts of the Empire of Bulan in the year 1000. So look that up, Bulan. And that's where you get like different terms like Ashkenazis. And I think somehow that's how that name actually is accredited to the story I just told you. And so when you say there are Jews, but they're Ashkenazi Jews, those are the ones that came from when you see the Z and you hear the Azi, that's Khazari, that empire over in Khazarian. Isn't that what what are their names in Hollywood? The women that have the TV shows and all the perfume, and they're rich and everything. I haven't paid attention to them ever. Kardashians. Aren't they supposed to be Khazarians? And aren't Khazarians considered beautiful as far as the women? Khazarian women. But that's where the whole thing started with these, the bloodthirsty Zionist world domination, New World Order types came from that origin of the sun worshippers that were the Khazars in the region of Persia and kind of the upper northern edges of Persia. Like about 2,000 miles north of Ur, where Nebuchadnezzar was, but still related to the region. And they were blood drinking, ball worshiping, baby slurping people, as Theo Vaughn says, in that era, or like Epstein. There is a lot more gross, terrible, terrible, terrible stuff going on than you even can imagine with this Epstein cover-up, and the things that are redacted and the things that they are talking about, the things that they do on those islands. Think of it this way, the things that they dispose of on those islands. Oh, the real truth, because it's all about the ritual and there is a need for blood, and And what they actually do is they open portals and they invite demons to escape. And once you let them escape, they're real. So, they can do some damage. But all you have to do is just stay away from rituals that would open those things. I was reading earlier about a Raggedy Ann doll. Have you ever heard that story about the Annabelle doll? Where is it? Let's see. Anybody heard of the Annabelle doll that if you stared into her eyes, you would be possessed by its demon? Annabelle doll. It's a Raggedy Ann. It's on display at some company has it set up and you can go there. But if you look at this doll, see, comedian Matt Rife buys home where Annabelle doll is kept. Matt Rife bought the house where the Annabelle doll is kept. What?
The creepiest doll in America has been sold, and the new owner is somebody you've probably heard of. The Raggedy Ann doll inspired the horror movie series Annabelle and The Conjuring, though they look nothing alike. For decades, believers in the supernatural have said she's demonically possessed.
Thank you so much.
Now,
man.
comedian Matt Rife.
They say that it's not that the doll's possessed. You don't have to look at it and wait for it to do something evil, or so that if you actually stare into it long enough, the demons on the other side will jump through the portal of the eye connection into your soul. And so you want to look away because the doll is a portal to evil.
Rife is revealing that he and a friend have purchased the home where Annabelle lives in a glass display box.
We are the legal guardians and caretakers of all 750 haunted artifacts and items in the Warren Museum, including the Annabelle doll.
This is the house and museum in Monroe, Connecticut that Matt Rife just bought. It's also where the spooky doll Annabelle lives. Earlier this summer, Annabelle went on tour.
That's a good
with
investment,
paranormal investigator.
Matt.
But in the middle of
He's
the national
smart.
tour, he was found dead in his hotel room in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, at age 54.
Room 420, cardiac arrest.
420.
Rife has more than 41 million fans who follow him on social media. And today, some are
That was on
wondering if
purpose.
the edgy comedian is putting himself at risk.
I should probably collect stamps or something. Might be a little safer.
I'm sure they had room 420 on purpose on his Inside Edition. Numbers, whenever there's obvious numbers in any type of news junket, it's not on accident. 2 nights alone in the Warren Museum with the Annabelle doll. So anyway, what I was going to tell you is, do you think the Greys are demonic? If not, I finished all my videos and we're way off topic. I don't see anyone in the chat. If you're watching and you just realize I'm at the end, you want to say something or bring up a topic or say hello, let me know you're in here. I'm going to check out, and that'll be it for tonight. Hopefully we'll get the body count going up here when I'm live. So I'm trying to do this about the every time. Sometime after 11:30 p.m. Central Time is when I start. Okay, and we'll end with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we come together and we chat and discuss openly things that are in the news, things that are reported and testified by people of these little gray beings that that we observe. And they seem to be, some say, preparing us for the world change that is coming, or some tell them that they're hybridizing the genes. Others tell people that they take for a ride, that they are how the machinery works. And what are these beings, Father? If you can answer so that we can know in our research, like, what are they? Are they the demons that were cast out and down here? Because some of them don't act like it, and they are just neutral or seem to be following your commands to not harm, to do no harm, and they cannot intervene, really. Although some maybe have broken that and made deals with governments, but still there's a recognized structure of thy creation, Father, and I'm trying to see how they fit into my painting of the world and what's above us and what is in the heavens and the firmament and what is, even though these grays live in the earth now, under the oceans, in the oceans, mountains, different places, lakes, jungles. I think they are in the jungles. There's probably a big city of them in the Amazon jungle that is hidden somehow. And, things like that. So why don't we freely know them? Is this all part of the human test, Father? If so, we're getting pretty advanced if we're asking you about it, because we're doing research and watching and listening with our open eyes and ears. So please bless us to have fun and let this movement grow. People who are waking up to see how things are working and pragmatically solve the mysteries. Why does everything have to be a mystery? Let's just solve them. And bless us with health and strength and love from our loved ones whom we miss. And please let them know that we love them and that these things we pray, Father, in the name of thy Son. Amen. All right, that's the prayer. We will stop streaming now. Thank you for coming. If you ever come to a stream and, before you boot out, if you're going to scoop before the end of one of my gibberings, if you want a prayer before you go, just skip to the end of the video, because I always pray. If you want a prayer for the day, just skip to the end and get your prayer. Bye.